Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this is a presentation on Upadeshamrita in several parts, written by Rupa Goswami, and it's found in an anthology of his various verses. It's a very short work, but it summarizes a lot of the essentials of devotion or bhakti yoga, and particularly it ends with a lot of Raganuga bhakti. So Srila Prabhupada actually translated and commented on this work in the 1970s, between his, or while he was translating Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. The title itself means Nectar of Instruction, which is the English title. Amrita is nectar, and Upadesh means instructions. So the first several verses, of course, are quite elementary as compared to the later verses about Raganuga Bhakti, and they're quite accessible to us. A little bit unlike nectar devotion, which just starts to describe bhakti and then goes into a lot of details about sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, and prema bhakti. The beginning of this work begins by describing some of the various qualifications or qualities by which we can perform bhakti steadily. So the first verse, of course, describes all the obstacles that we have to control. So we have Vajja Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Udaropasta Vegam, Etan Vegan Yo Vishaheta Dhiraha, Savam Apimam Pritavim Sasyat, which describes the various Vegas, which the intelligent person should control. And what are the Vegas? Vega means an urge or a force. So obviously it means material urges, material forces that we have to control. And Rupa Goswami defines these as 6 different forces that we have to control. So we have the urges of the tongue, the belly, the genital, etc., anger, mind, words, etc., all these different things. So we can classify these various urges. Of course, we'll find in various scriptures that there's always this idea you have to control your senses, you have to control your mind, etc. So definitely we do have to control words and mind, etc., in order to advance, because the mind and the words and the senses go out to material enjoyment. And this is counter to engaging the senses in bhakti. So we have to control these senses. So we can classify them in various ways, such as verbal, mental, and physical control. So we have on the verbal level, of course, you have words, mental, mind, and anger, which we can say manasa, krodha. So manasa, of course, can refer to mind in general, but more particularly desire, or kama and krodha, 2 things commonly associated together. And the physical, of course, we have the physical senses, the tongue, the belly, and the genital. So these are physical senses. So that's one way we can do it. Another way, of course, is we can classify it as mental, as desire and anger, manasa, krodha, and then the sensual ones, the senses, tongue, eye, ear, nose, and skin, and then the physical, voice, genital, belly, anus, hands, and feet. Of course, we see all these are not mentioned in the verse, but we do get reference to the tongue as one of the senses like that. So we have different types of senses. We have the knowledge gathering senses, which are mentioned in the second group, the sensual things. So we get the tongue for taste, the eye for form, the ear for sound, the nose for smell, and the skin for touch. So these are the 5 sense organs. We could say the Gyanendriya. And then we have the 5 Karmendriya associated with our body. The voice, the genital, the belly, anus, hands, and feet. These are called the gross senses, or if you could say the senses that are used to, along with the other senses, for knowledge gathering senses, in order to fulfill our desires. So we call them the physical senses. So usually, of course, the belly is not included as a sense, but if we look in the Bhagavatam, actually, it becomes a sense. So there's a description in the 2nd canto. When the universal form desires to take food and drink in its location of the abdomen, the sense organs in the form of the intestines and veins, their devata, the rivers and oceans, and their sense objects, fullness from food and fullness from liquids, which take shelter of the sense organs and their devatas appear. So in the Bhagavatam itself, we have the belly also included. So that's one way of analyzing the group of senses. So, as I said, the scriptures often tell us to control the senses. And this is very basic to spiritual life, and we'll see in Bhagavad-gita in the 2nd chapter itself that this is emphasized. You have to control the senses. You have to control the mind. So what does Krishna say in 2nd chapter? The mind is your friend, and the mind is also your enemy. If you control the mind, it's your friend. If you don't control the mind, it's your enemy. Why? Because the mind and the senses, they go off in material world trying to enjoy, they commit sinful activities, and then you end up with bad karma. And then you sink into lower species of life. So if you want to advance, we do have to control in some way or other. Of course, we often criticize jnanis and yogis who try to control the senses also. And we say they spend a lot of time, thousands of years, trying to control their senses and their life errors, etc. And they get very tired doing this because it takes such effort. And then we say, well, compared to that, then bhakti is much easier. So definitely, it does take effort to control the senses. And Krishna also says this. Arjuna says, oh, it's too difficult to control the senses. So what am I supposed to do? And then Krishna says, well, if you want to advance spiritually, you have to control the senses. Sooner or later, you have to control the senses. So we have to be realistic and make some attempt at least. Of course, in Bhakti Yoga, we have a different way of controlling the senses, and that is by engaging the senses in serving Krishna instead of in serving mind. So that's our method. And it's much easier than, stopping the senses in jnana or yoga. Senses. Lowest yoga, called karma yoga, there's so many rules for controlling the senses. And so we have everything you can do. Do this, do this, do this, do this. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So that is all sense control. Just as if your child goes to school, then they'll tell them at school, okay, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. And if you do, you go to jail, whatever like this. So this is all sense control. And normal people, of course, will listen to that and say, they control their senses. There's a few people that don't listen, and they start breaking the law. These are the people that don't control their senses, at least to a minimum degree. Of course, in scriptures, we have more detailed sense control than just, don't lie, don't steal, etc. And this becomes even more difficult for people to follow. But anyway, the Karma Yoga scriptures, Varnashram system, are all about following rules to control your senses. You do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and you have to do it every day, and if you don't do it, you're sinful. And so you engage in one way, and then it says, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. You avoid all these sinful activities. So it's largely an attempt to control the senses. Of course, the method is a little bit different. And that is that in Karma Yoga, there is a recognition that people are on different levels. So we have people in Tamagun, Rajagun, and Sattvagun. Those in Sattvagun can easily control their senses. Those in Tamagun could not. They're very uncontrolled. So the karma yoga system allows the people in Tamagun less rules. And the people in Sattvagun have more rules. So we have the Brahmanas, they have to follow a lot of rules. The Sudras do not have to follow such rules. So we see that the Brahmanas have very strict rules on what you can eat and whatever like that. And then we come to the Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Sudras, not so many rules anymore. But for the Brahmanas, very, very strict. So in all spheres we have this idea of at the top, when you are more qualified, as being in Sattvagun, then you have to follow more and more rules, more sense control rules. So the sense control rules are graded according to your gunas in the material world, because it is impossible for the people on a lower level to follow the same rules as the people in Sattvagun. In this karma yoga system, of course, they have what you can do and what you cannot do. And it includes, of course, occupations that do not involve sin, and worship of devatas, and a little bit of worship of the Supreme Lord among their activities. It's put in a lower position. Why? Because ultimately the goal is material happiness, material steadiness. If not in next life, at least in this lifetime, you can lead a passably peaceful life. And of course, if you follow very nicely, then you can actually promote yourself to Svargaloka, etc. But it doesn't talk about liberation or anything like that. So that's why it's put in a lower category. But it is attempt at sense control to raise you from at least Tamagun to Sattvagun. Then we have Jnana Yoga. So Jnana Yoga is considered superior because it's not concentrating on getting material enjoyment. It strives for liberation from the material world. So it's considered higher. So here, the sense control is quite strict. And you're not even qualified for Jnana Yoga unless you're firmly situated in Sattvagun already. So it's the Brahmanas who are allowed to practice Jnana Yoga. If you're a Sudra or a Vaishya or Kshatriya, you cannot practice Jnana Yoga at all. If you're fixed in Sattva as a Brahmana, then you can go on to Jnana Yoga. And what do? You study Vedanta Sutras. So of course, Sudras and Kshatriyas and Vaishyas are not going to be interested in studying Brahma Sutras and use logic and everything to analyze the sutras and study the commentaries of Shankaracharya. They're not going to be interested at all. So it requires a certain type of person to go through this, rigorous study of scriptures and use logic, etc., to understand you're not the body, you're the Atma. So this is the subject of Jnana Yoga. And in doing so, they study the scriptures and they begin to renounce. So a lot of the Jnana Yogis are people who are sannyasis and persons who are very, very renounced. That is a stricter type of sense control with a higher goal. So after you do karma yoga and finish and get in Sattvagun, then you're qualified for Jnana Yoga. Then we have Bhakti Yoga. This also involves sense control. But as I said, Jnana Yoga is rather difficult because you have to stop all your senses. And same with Ashtanga Yoga, you have to stop your senses from acting. And this is naturally difficult because we're used to using our senses in this world. So very difficult. As long as you've got a material body, you just stop your senses. So, Bhakti Yoga does not tell you to stop your senses, rather to engage them differently. So you engage your senses, but you engage your senses in worshiping Krishna. So you hear about Krishna, you think about Krishna, you take Krishna prasadam, etc. So you engage your senses spiritually instead. And what is the goal? The goal is not material enjoyment. The goal is not liberation. The goal is prema. So we have these three different systems, the yogas, all with sense control, but the sense control is necessary definitely for civilized human beings. But in Bhakti Yoga, the sense control is the approach is very different. It's not by stopping the senses, it is by engaging the senses. And the goal is different again. So in Bhakti Yoga, yes, we do have sense control, and in that sense it's similar to Jnana or even Karma Yoga, but the goal is very different. And the method of controlling the senses is very different. So it looks similar, but at the same time a little bit different. So, though this verse is talking about the dangers of uncontrolled senses, and you have to control the senses to progress spiritually, in itself, this is not accepted as part of bhakti. And we'll see in Nectar Devotion, Bhakti Rasa Vida Sindhu, Rupa Goswami describes 64 angas of bhakti. But we don't have these controlling the Vegas as an anga of bhakti, at least not directly. In a very indirect way, he talks about it. He says you should not fall under the control of lamentation, etc. That's the only reference he makes in one of the angas of bhakti. But he doesn't go to, okay, lust, anger, greed, you have to reject this and that and control the mind. He doesn't talk about that. So they're not strictly angas of bhakti themselves, but controlling of the senses is very favorable for bhakti. Because we control the senses in a certain way. So in other words, controlling the senses not only implies stopping the senses from being materially engaged, but engaging them in the positive angas of bhakti, like hearing and chanting and worshiping the Lord. So we reject the unfavorable elements. And thus we do have, in our vows, we have 4 regulated principles. So this is controlling the senses. It's put there. Even though we'll find in Nectar Devotion, these 4 regulated principles nowhere mentioned in the angas of bhakti. They're not there. But they're obviously favorable for bhakti. So therefore, they don't produce bhakti in themselves, but favorable for bhakti. So we reject unfavorable things. And that rejection of unfavorable things, of course, we can say is part of surrender. So we have this definition of surrender having 6 elements. So the first 2 are we reject what is unfavorable, we accept what is favorable. So these are the first 2 elements of the 6 aspects of surrender. So in order to surrender to the Lord, we reject the unfavorable. So you reject uncontrolled senses and mind, etc. So that's the basic idea behind presenting these Vegas here. Another way of looking at this is we do have the primary rules: hearing, chanting, remembering, worshiping the Lord, archana, everything leading to prema. Because we do have a body, and we're living in the material world, usually in a society, we need some rules to guide us on how to support our body, what to eat, how to keep ourselves clean, how to raise a family, how to use our job, etc. All these rules are there. So we take the rules from Varnashram in general. We follow the same principles, a lot of the same principles, rather than trying to invent our own principles. So we can use the rules of Varnashram in a secondary way to support ourselves, as long as we make the primary rules of bhakti always primary and keep the other rules secondary. We can accept those rules, as long as they are favorable. If they become unfavorable, then we can also reject them. So in the Varnashram system, there are rules for how to keep clean. So you have to bathe every day, etc. And there's but of course, there's a lot of complicated rules there. So if you're looking Shastra, then not only you have to bathe every day, you can only bathe with certain types of water. Some water is clean, some water is not clean. So you cannot bathe in certain water. You can bathe in river water, in well water. You cannot bathe in tap water. There's all sorts of, real details which were very difficult for us to follow in the modern world. But you'll see very strict people like the sannyasis in the Madhva Mat, they will they have to have a well there, and they take the water of the well and they bathe with the well water, etc. They're very, very strict, but very difficult for most people in this world to do that. So there are many strict rules. And along with the bathing, just throw water on yourself. There's rules for how to throw the water on yourself. There's mantras you have to chant for the water, etc., etc. There's rules for how you dry yourself off even. Like that. There's so many different rules for, cleanliness and whatever. What cloth you can wear, what cloth you cannot wear, how you have to wash your cloth, and, so many things. Yeah. So too many rules are there ultimately. It's very, very difficult. Of course, among the rules, we do have the rules for family. And then there we have the samskars, which we generally follow. So we have marriage samskar, birth samskar, upanayan, and all these other samskars, which are purificatory rites as the child grows throughout life. So anyway, the secondary rules can be useful for us as long as we're in the material body and we have families, etc. But they never become the primary rules. Yeah. So why the secondary rules are secondary is because in themselves they do not produce bhakti or prema. They help purify us in the material world. In other words, they get us from tamagun to sattvagun. In that sense, useful. Because sattva gun is more favorable than tamagun for advancing in spiritual life. So therefore, if we follow those rules, fine. They help us come to a sattvic level so that we can perform the rules of bhakti properly and attain prema. Okay, so we had manasa vega, the mind, which we can take as the desire for enjoying. A desire for objects, etc. But it goes a little further than that for the Vaishnava. The desire for enjoying in the material world, of course, that's all the karma and stuff we want to do. But even the desire for liberation, as in jnana, or for siddhis in yoga, we have to give up all that. That's all manasa vega also for us. For the people in practicing karma yoga, no. We can start going for liberation or siddhis, etc., and then we practice yoga or jnana. But in bhakti, no, we have to reject that also. There's also a manasa vega. That's a urge of the mind. So, the opposite of that is the krodha vega, anger. That means we have desire for objects, and then we have the opposite, what obstructs the enjoyment of objects. And through that we have our anger, harsh words, whatever, hatred, negative feelings, etc. So we have we can say the positive feelings of desiring things and the negative things of hating things. And we're basically hating things because they obstruct our desires. So these are the basic dualities, iccha, dvesha, that take place in the material world, which are described by Krishna in Bhagavad-gita. These are dualities, and they're the basic dualities of the mind. We go on one level or the other. We do our actions based on a desire, or we perform an action based on anger. All because we want to fulfill our material desires. So they go together. So we have manasa vega, krodha vega. And somehow we have to control them. Jiva vega. Jiva is the tongue. And what does the tongue do? It tastes things. So Rupa Goswami does not mention the other knowledge gathering senses, the eye, ear, nose, and skin, but obviously we have to control all of them. We cannot say, well, Rupa Goswami only describes the tongue, so we have to control the tongue. We don't have to control the eye, don't have to control the ear, don't have to control the nose, don't have to control our touch. Just the tongue, no. It means all of them. So he mentions one, but we can say he's assuming that it means all of the knowledge gathering senses we have to control. all of them create problem if we don't control them. Huh? Then we have the karmendriya, the senses for actions. So we have the voice. This is a karmendriya, speaking. And in our devotional literature, this is very, very important. So we have to control the tongue. We have to control the speech. Why? Because we can speak all sorts of topics about sense enjoyment, negative philosophies like impersonalism, or jnana, or karma yoga, etc. And that speaking, why is this, what's wrong with it is we engage in the speaking, and then after that we engage in the thinking. By speaking, then we'll also think of these things more. And then when we think of it more, then we will do them. We'll go into action after that. So when we go into, we swerve away from bhakti yoga and we get into impersonalism or yoga or whatever, or we get into sense enjoyment, we get into sinful activities or whatever. So we have to control the sense of speaking. The belly, of course, is related to eating. And the belly is considered one of the Vegas because if you don't have your belly full, then you want to put food in it. So apart from the tasting of the food with the tongue, we have the tongue was, of course, one of the knowledge gathering senses. But we have the belly here, which is an action sense in one sense, and you put food in the belly to fill it up. And if it's not filled, then you feel very agitated. But the problem is that, as a human being, we do have to control this urge to fill up the belly because we tend to fill it up too much. And then we get sick, whatever, indigestion, or we get fat or whatever. So it causes problems for us. So we do have to control. And of course we have the genitals, the sex organs. And we, of course, for the ashramas, we have all sorts of rules controlling this. So, of course, very strict, and for brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis. Grihastas, some rule is there for controlled sex life. But nevertheless, there's always control. So, if we have these Vegas operating, they will, of course, take us into material attachments of some sort. And this is very unfavorable for us. We see there's one of the aparads, the 10th aparad, to remain materially attached, even after understanding so many glories of the Lord, in the name, etc. We still have our material attachments. So if we have these uncontrolled Vegas operating, we get very attached to our material activities, using those senses and mind and whatever. And then it becomes impossible to advance in devotional service. So this becomes the 10th aparad. In sadhana, of course, we're not expected to be completely detached. But at least there has to be some minimum detachment to start the process of bhakti yoga. Not too much material attachment. If we're too much material attached, it becomes impossible. So it is like a person, we have the example of the boatman on the river, and he's got the anchor in there, and he's going upstream and putting all his effort into going up the stream, but then they see, oh, the anchor's in there and he didn't go anywhere. So if we're very firmly attached to material things, it becomes very difficult to go in the opposite direction. If we're trying to go to Krishna, but we're actually trying to go in the opposite direction, what happens? We go nowhere. So therefore, too much material attachment becomes aparad in that sense. And we're doing bhakti, but it's not real bhakti at all because we're actually becoming more attached to the material world. So, therefore, we do have to have that sense of control. So we have to control on the mental level the desire and anger, the knowledge-gathering senses, and the physical senses. All these have to be controlled to some degree. We can't do it completely, but we have to control. Okay. Okay. So the second text deals again with some unfavorable things. 6 items that destroy bhakti. So we can't control our senses and our mind, etc. And then what happens, we end up with these 6 items, which will be very unfavorable for bhakti. Yeah? Overeating, over-endeavor, over-talking, rejection of rules, bad association, and unsteadiness. So that these are actually the result of the previous Vegas. If they're uncontrolled, then we end up with this, and bhakti gets destroyed. Yeah. Well, Vegas. Okay. We can somewhat relate those previous 6 to the 6 items mentioned here. It's a little bit of a speculation on my part, but I couldn't figure out how to relate them properly, so I made this type of diagram. So we have manasa vega, krodha vega, desire for over endeavor. We have all our material endeavors that we want to accomplish. Even though our endeavor is actually to get prema, we concentrate on material endeavors instead. So this is over endeavor. It's always good to endeavor for bhakti, but when we mix that with material endeavors, then it becomes troublesome. And anger, rejection of the rules. We find it too cumbersome to follow all the rules of bhakti, so we begin rejecting them in anger. Okay, so the unsteadiness was one thing, or lolium, passion, obviously represents the uncontrolled senses, like the tongue. We have over-talking, prajalpa, obviously to do with the voice, vachovegam, controlling words, overeating, having to do with the belly, and association, asatsanga, association, especially with women, which would be uncontrolled genitals. So that's how we can relate them to the previous one, 6. Prayasa, wrong endeavors or over endeavor. So, this is the result of our strong desires for something in the material world. In terms of things like jnana yoga is considered to be prayasa, over endeavor. Why? Because you want liberation. So when liberation becomes your goal, naturally you have to endeavor by that by trying to control your senses, and that takes a lot of effort. So that's a prayasa. Some people, in order to get enjoyment, will undergo great vratas, like Hiranyakasipu. Why does he do all of his austerities? Because he wants to enjoy. So that's, of course, nowadays not maybe popular, but in previous times, they considered, okay, if I want to enjoy, I have to do all these tapasyas, etc. We see all sorts of demons doing tapasyas in order to get greater enjoyment. So that, again, is prayasa, where we have to put great effort in order to get material enjoyment or liberation. On a level in the modern world, of course, you see families and people working very hard to maintain the family, to buy a house, to buy a car, to get a good job, and all this sort of stuff. And we get too involved on that. That, again, is prayasa. Because by doing that, we can't focus on any spiritual goal at all. So all this has to do with the manasa vega, that we're controlled by our desires, and then we get involved too much in the material world. One other problem is that we do bhakti yoga, and then we can also mix our material goals with that. And we kind of merge them and think they're also spiritual goals, and we strive to get these goals when actually they are material, but we think they're spiritual goals. This also becomes a confusion. Niyamagraha, that is, we don't want to accept the rules. This is, of course, essential for bhakti, that we do have rules. Now, bhakti, of course, is a little liberal, and we also reject rules. So we reject the rules of varnashram as being too restrictive. And in place of those, we have pleasing Krishna somehow or other as the final rule. So we do have that sense of rejecting rules, but that doesn't mean we reject all rules. We have rules for bhakti also. And especially when we're in the sadhana, we do have to follow rules. We have to follow rules of scripture. And of course, we do have Raganuga Bhakti, which we may think, oh, less rules there, but our acharyas also say that even in Raganuga Bhakti, which is a little more spontaneous, there are rules to follow. You can only practice Raganuga in a certain way according to scriptures. You can't make up your own system of Raganuga. There is a system, and there are rules for that also. So we do have to follow the rules, and we do have to follow scripture. We do have to follow the parampara and the acharyas. We can't make up our own system. But people become frustrated, so they begin to reject the rules. Again, an aspect of our desire to enjoy in the material world. Lolium means unsteady. Yeah. In terms of bhakti, it will mean that we can't focus on our dedication to serving Krishna, and we get sidetracked by these other goals of liberation or svargaloka or material assets, which arises from desires again, and uncontrolled senses. So we have the jiva vega and all the other senses. So this creates unsteadiness in our bhakti. Prajalpa, that is useless talk. So, of course, it can involve talk about material things, obviously prajalpa. But actually, even talking about spiritual things can be prajalpa. So, one, of course, is jnana and yoga and karma yoga, all scripture, but it's also prajalpa. So the only talk we should have is bhakti. But even if you're talking about bhakti, it can also be prajalpa. If your desire is to defeat others, which is material, if your desire is to get fame, and from that you get some money or whatever, it's also prajalpa. So that is why Prabhupada often condemns the professional reciters, the Bhagavat Saptaha speakers or whatever, because basically they may not even be Vaishnavas, but they're talking all about Bhagavatam for 7 days in order to make a living. So it's all called prajalpa. Waste of time. So when the scripture comes out of the mouth of a non-Vaishnava, it becomes like poison. So we should not speak like that. Our motives in speaking should be pure. It should be not on other topics like karma yoga and whatever. It should not be for sense gratification. So all this arises from the vega of speaking. So we speak about the wrong things. This ultimately can lead to aparad like sadhu ninda, criticizing the devotees or criticizing guru, etc. Atyahara, eating too much. Of course, it can also mean over enthusiasm for material accumulations. Yeah, so if we get too much attached to material enjoyment and acquiring material things, or if we too attracted to eating, this is called the udara vega. From the udara, the belly attraction, we get this atyahara, over eating, etc. Jana sangha, bad association. So of course, on one level is association with gyanis, karmis, and materialists. Another would be illicit sex activities, etc., which was related to the upasta vega. So in this way, the elements in the second verse kind of relate to the first verse and the different vegas. Okay, so third verse is more favorable. We get the favorable things which do not destroy bhakti, but perfect bhakti, prasiddhyate. They give us perfection in bhakti. So 6 things, on the other hand. So these are apart from the, more or less, apart from the angas of bhakti that are mentioned in the Nectar devotion, 64 angas. We're a little bit separate from them. They say they're attitudes, largely attitudes, that we should have in our performance of bhakti. So, bhakti is nourished by enthusiasm, conviction, gravity, following rules which we previously rejected, giving up bad association, and following proper conduct. So these are the favorable items, and the previous items were unfavorable. So when we control the Vegas, we get these favorable elements appearing, which can also be related to the previous 6 things. So we had the over-endeavor, which arose from desire, manasavega. And the opposite of that, of course, is we control all of that, and we get conviction, or nishchaya. We get firm conviction as a result. Niyamagra was rejection of rules due to anger and krodha vega. And then we have following the rules. We control that vega, have willingness to follow all the rules. Karma pravartan, acting in the proper way. We had unsteadiness, or lullium, represented by the tongue, and of course all the other senses also. So we follow proper conduct, that is sadvriti. Over talking was prajalpa, that was the vacho vega, and instead we had dharya, being very grave, controlled in all of our speaking, etc. Overeating, or achahara, which was the udara vega for the belly, and instead of that we get enthusiasm for bhakti. Instead of enthusiasm for overeating and whatever, we have enthusiasm for performing bhakti properly, utsaha. And bad association, or janasanga, which was related to upasta vega, the genitals. And then the positive one, we avoid all of these unhealthy associations, sangha chaga. So in this way we get the positive aspects related to controlling the different vegas, whereas verse 2 was all the negative results of not controlling the vegas. Now, so we have utsaha, that means enthusiasm. So we are enthusiastic to practice bhakti, but we are indifferent to all the other processes like jnana, karma, and yoga. And this will counteract this atyahara, desire for accumulating goods, etc. And nishchaya, we practice with great conviction and faith, understanding that bhakti is the only path. So this will counteract our prayasa, over-endeavoring for material goals. We have this gravity. The devotee is serious about his devotional practices. And this is the opposite of talking about all the material subject matters, etc. Karma pravartana, observing the rules properly, according to scripture, and being indifferent to the other processes of jnana, yoga, and karma. So that is the opposite of the tendency of niyamagraha. And sangha tyaga, giving up the bad association, illicit association with women, associate with the persons controlled by women, associate with the person associating with women illicitly, associating with non-devotees, with mayavadis, atheists, and pretenders. So all this has to be given up. And shadvriti. We can take this proper as proper conduct, which means that we support our material body ethically according to the varnashramic rules. In other words, we don't support ourselves by performing sinful activities as our profession. We have a proper, job, an ethical job, with minimum of sinful activities. And this way it becomes favorable for bhakti. Okay, we can end there, I guess. Those 3 verses. Any question there?
Karma Mishra Bhakti and Yoga Mishra Bhakti. So Yoga Mishra Bhakti is using one of the yoga processes to attain liberation or something like that. or to attain, maybe the goal is Shantaras and all that. But with Karma Mishra Bhakti, is that performing in one of the four Varnas and doing Bhakti? Is that?
Oh. So what is this Karma Mishra Bhakti? So when we talk about Karma Mishra Bhakti, Gyan Mishra Bhakti, or Yoga Mishra Bhakti, we are implying that the main process is Bhakti, but we're also doing other processes along with it. In itself, that is allowed within the definition of pure Bhakti, mentioned by Rupa Goswami in Nectar Devotion, because he says it should not be obstructed by karma, jnana, yoga, etc. So obstruction means that sometimes we could practice and karma is not an obstruction, or jnana is not an obstruction. At other times we practice and may be an obstruction. So therefore that's not to be proper. It makes our bhakti impure. So in other words, we can perform bhakti along with other processes as long as they are not unfavorable for bhakti. And then it's okay. It's still considered pure bhakti. Now the negative aspect, of course, is that these other processes may obstruct bhakti somehow or other. One is that karma yoga, for instance, we're doing our varnashram activities along with the bhakti, but the intrinsic nature of varnashram is not bhakti or even liberation. It is material enjoyment. So when we start practicing these angas of karma yoga, varnashram, we may get attracted to the material goals, and then this is going to contaminate the bhakti. So in that sense, it becomes unfavorable. Another way in which the karma yoga can be, or even jnana yoga could be unfavorable, is that we can think that if I don't do my karma yoga and varnashramic activities, my bhakti will not become perfect. In other words, the bhakti becomes dependent upon our karma yoga. So when we think like that, then we are degrading the bhakti and thinking bhakti is only a material activity, also like karma yoga, which is one of the offenses. So therefore, we can do karma yoga, karma mishra bhakti, as long as we're very clear that it is only for maintaining our body, whatever, okay, it's fine. We don't mix it with material desires. And we never think, if I don't do that, I become sinful or whatever, or if I don't do it, my bhakti cannot progress. If we think like that, then it also becomes an obstacle to bhakti. So then mainly we would do it for supporting our body and of course living in society, etc. But the other reason would be to give an example to people who don't have faith in bhakti, that at least they do karma yoga, do something rather than nothing, if they don't have any faith in bhakti at all. So he set an example. So this is what the great devotees do, like Dhruva Maharaj or Ambarish Maharaj. They're not attracted to it in one sense, being a kshatriya or being a king, but they do it just to set example for other people. So in that sense, yeah, you could do karma yoga, and it's not different from doing pure bhakti without the karma yoga also. In fact, generally, previously, people really did not separate the two things and do bhakti without anything else. Of course, Bhagavatam says you can give up your dharmas, etc. But generally, people followed to some degree, but without attachment. And that's still pure bhakti. So we see the associates of Lord Chaitanya. Some are Brahmins, some are Kshatriyas, some are Vaishyas, some are Sudras. They carried out their Varna activities in the Varnashram system along with the Nam Sankirtan movement. But they didn't let it contaminate, and they did not depend on those things for their advancement in bhakti or anything. And so then they're just performing pure bhakti along with these activities.
So that is not considered karma mishra, like for example...
Well, karma mishra, but there's nothing wrong with that karma mishra bhakti.
Yeah, so like for us grastas, because we're working, we have family, wife,
that's not
kids.
Karma yoga.
Yeah, that's not karma yoga,
That's
but karma
working.
mishra. I'm saying, is that considered karma mishra?
No, because
No.
karma mishra actually means varnashramic activities.
Yeah.
If you're doing your job according to the varnashramic principles, fine. And if you're, I don't know, Brahma, Vaishya, Kshatriya, and you're doing a Vaishya job as a Vaishya or Kshatriya job as a Kshatriya, then of course, yeah, and you're following the rules in Manu, according to what a Kshatriya should do as Kshatriya duties, or if you're working for the government, following on that, then it would be, Varnashramic, and it would be karma, Mr. Bhakti. You're doing it along with your Bhakti, but it's not interfering with it as long as you don't have contamination with those goals of karma yoga, etc. And if you're not doing also, it's not a problem. So you can do bhakti without following the varnashramic principles, as long as you're not doing all sorts of sinful activities and being, influenced by the 6 Vegas, etc. But you're following bhakti, no problem with that also. So Bhagavan says you can give up svadharma, that means all your varnashramic rules, if you have firm faith in the Lord, and it's not a sin. It can be done. As I said, most people didn't do that. They still followed, but without attachment, so they were also pure. But if you give it up also, it's not a problem.
So for us devotees, we get initiated, we follow the 4 regulative principles,
Yeah.
we follow the process of sadhana bhakti to start with.
Yeah.
So all this would come under then bhakti yoga, obviously not pure devotional service because we're not at that level, but it will be kind of
We're actually supposed to do pure bhakti from the beginning.
Okay.
Well, that's the definition given in Nectar Devotion. We start with
It's like the green
pure
mango.
Bhakti, Uttama Bhakti of sadhana, bhava, and prema.
So we're the green mango in a
So
way.
as devotees, we should understand that we're not pure, and you're never pure unless you get to prema. But we call the whole process, sadhana, bhava, and prema, as pure bhakti. So we were supposed to practice bhakti, sadhana bhakti, as pure bhakti, which means when we're practicing bhakti, we're not praying for material goals or whatever. We're not praying for liberation or siddhis or anything like that. We're trying to get prema. We do have anarthas, we do have desires, but we're not mixing that with our bhakti. So that's also called pure bhakti in sadhana.
And Jnana Mishra, the only difference is they're following the process of Ashtanga yoga. Their goal is pure. They're not asking for anything material or anything.
So they may do it in order to assist the bhakti in controlling their senses or whatever, but in a very secondary way, because our main way of controlling the senses is bhakti itself.
Yes.
But they may do it maybe for health reasons or whatever like that. So okay, no problem, no problem. As I said, all these things for the body and whatever you can do. But don't mix the goals of siddhis or liberation with it. Then it's okay.
On this topic, Maharaj, I think what I also understand is that if the means is Krishna, then actually that's a pure bhakti. If the means is liberation, so for example, the Guni Pradhan Bhakti, which is the Bhagavad-gita of chapter 1 to 6 and 13 to 18. So whether it is karma but tinged with bhakti, so that's the devotees or the yogis, they are using Krishna as only the means, but their goal is liberation. So that's where it's the Guni Pradhan, or wherein actually if it's the Bhakti Pradhan, where the goal is Krishna, but their means is actually Krishna as well, but there'll be tinge of jnana or
So
karma.
karma, Mr. Bhakti, Gyan, Mr.
Yeah.
Bhakti. Yeah. And the results are different. Yeah? So if you're doing mainly Jnana yoga and you're mixing a little bhakti to get liberation, then you get the liberation. You don't get anything further than that. If you're doing Gyan, Mr. Bhakti, where bhakti is the prominent process, and there's a tinge of jnana there, it could be, now you could do that jnana by doing pure bhakti. And you got a little bit of liberation idea along with your bhakti and your prema, then you would end up better than liberation, but less than a devotee gets doing pure bhakti. In other words, you can get the spiritual world, but you only get a little bit of shanta, maximum shanta rati, maybe a little shanta rasa even. But you don't get dasya, sakya, vatsalya, or madhurya.
Maharaj, the difference between what is the rati and rasa? Say shanta rati and shanta rasa.
Yeah. So rati is a weak, we can say the bud of prema. It's not up to the prema level, so it's not full manifestation of rasa. So it is a precursor, more or less, of prema. So when we talk of shanta rati and shanta rasa, rati would be inferior to shanta rasa.
But they both can go to the spiritual world?
Who?
One with shanta rati and one with shanta rasa?
Well, you can do that. So as I said, that the Gyanis may get Gyanis or Bhaktas. Eventually, after a long time, they can get Shantarati, maybe Shantarasa in the spiritual world. And then we have the Karma Mr. Bhaktas. They can also get Salokya and they get the spiritual world. But they also get the Shantarati kind of, not directly serving the Lord, meditating on the Lord, and they got their nice body and their nice palace and nice place and whatever in the spiritual world.
So the other day I asked the question as well, like the trees and all that, what would that come under?
Yeah. Well, we don't usually aspire to be trees. And
Yeah. No, but what I'm saying is because they're also living entities, right?
Because usually we're talking about Rati and Rasa with people.
Yes.
Rather than other living entities. That'd be inferior to that even.
Okay.
Because they can't even relate. Like the Kumaras are in Shanta Rasa. So this is, in that sense, quite elevated. But for us, of course, Shanta is not so good. It's because Gyanis and yogis may get that. But then someone who's not even a human being there would be less than that even. So maybe a type of Shanta Rati or something.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, standard pranams. Sorry, I was just having a question when you were mentioning about now Karma Mishra Bhakti and Rati and Rasa, and suddenly my head was like, but if we have fallen from the spiritual world, and our position is already fixed, right? So is it like, how should I understand the part of, so I will go back to the same spot, come what may?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? Is my understanding correct? Because now I'm trying to understand, now when you were mentioning about Rati and Rasa and you're doing this Salokya, whatever, and is that living entities or that jiva's actual position?
Yeah. Well, we can say that the general principle is, according to your sadhana and your goal, you get the result. You worship a devata, you go to a devata. You worship Vishnu, you go to Vishnu. You worship Rama, you go to Rama. You worship Krishna, you go to Krishna. You worship Dwarka Krishna, you go to Dwarka Krishna in the spiritual world. You worship Krishna in Goloka, you go to Goloka. So that's a very simple principle. So according to your sadhana, you attain your result. Now, everything in the spiritual world is eternal and perfect. So whatever result, whatever sadhana you choose, whatever particular goal, when you get that goal, that's also perfect, it's also eternal. So in one sense, that's your eternal position, that's your fixed position in one sense, whatever you attain. But we get a little confused because we say, well, we're choosing in the material world. How is that eternal? So this is we can say maybe the material logic and experience, that we can't understand how everything in the spiritual world is eternal and perfect when we can choose it in the material world. But that's how it is explained in the scripture.
So that Swarupa Siddhi, it's already there, so we can't move.
Well, it's eternal in one sense, it's always there, but we haven't attained it.
Yeah.
But then it is attained according to your sadhana. And then your sadhana you choose. And your choice is based upon your sadhu sangha.
So can we also choose to move between rasas then?
That's permanent once you're fixed.
That's fine.
Once you get your goal, you're satisfied. So if you choose Rama eternally, and you attain Rama eternally. You don't choose something else later on.
I mean to say between Shanta, Sakya.
Same thing.
So that's eternal rasa, whatever.
Same. Yeah, you don't switch around. Otherwise, the whole spiritual world would be very unstable. Everyone's switching all the time.
Yeah.
One day you're a mother and father, next day you're a gopi, whatever. It's crazy.
So I will have to have I will have to have the absolute intention of attaining the Madhurya Ras, and I'll have to practice for that.
If you want to attain the position of a Saki or a Manjari or a Gopi or whatever. If you want to be a cowherd boy, different, then you would choose something different and you cultivate that.
But I will get to know that only to a level of when I do some, like to the level of sadhana where I have.
When you choose.
Yeah.
Yeah, you choose when you're capable of choosing, you develop a certain desire in a certain direction, then you choose. You can't artificially just whimsically choose something, you know. And so when you have that desire, then you choose a certain thing. If you don't, there's some, just a general, not even for any particular form. They worship everybody, all the forms of the God, you know, all the avatars, everything. And that's what they get in the spiritual world, a little bit of everything. But it's also it's also pretty weak, so it's a type of Shanta again, Shanta Rati. Because one day they're worshiping Rama, another Krishna, another Vishnu, another Narsimha, and there's a little bit of satisfaction with worshiping everybody, but it's quite weak. So generally we prefer to have one object of worship and develop a rasa with that particular form of the God, Supreme Lord.
Maharaj, sorry, I'm not able to understand the part of, so I fell from a specific position.
Well, we shouldn't think of falling, we just think of we're here and we go there. That's all. So we're in a fallen position. We don't have to think about how I got here, why I'm here, whatever. And then we get association of devotees, we get the mercy of the Sangha of devotees, we develop attraction for Krishna, and then we may develop attraction for Rasa, and then we attain that. And that's eternal. That's all. Finished. Don't think of what we were in the past or what we become, and just strive for the goal, and you get it.
Oh, that's so
Whatever
clear
you think
now.
of, you attain. Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita, you worship the Devatas, you go to the Devatas, worship ghosts, you go to the ghosts, worship Krishna, you go to Krishna.
Dandavat Pranam Prabhu. Now it's clear, Maharaj. And also, like, where you mentioned the sadhana, the bhava, and prema, all are pure bhakti.
Because if
And
we don't practice the pure bhakti and sadhana, we won't get the pure bhakti and prema. If we practice mixed bhakti now, we don't get the prema.
okay.
So we have to practice this pure bhakti now, even though we are not completely pure, because we do have anarthas in sadhana. But in pure bhakti means when we practice bhakti, we're not striving for or not asking Krishna for material benefits or liberation. That's what pure bhakti means in sadhana.
Right.
But
And like,
most people, they're praying for whatever. They go to, you know, any deity in the temple, they're praying for something material. So that's normal religion, but pure bhakti means no. We
right.
don't do that. We have desire, but we're not praying to Krishna for that.
Yeah. So when I'm not praying, so that is not my intention, but my chanting is not perfect.
Not perfect,
So
no.
so I actually, maybe I understood, I'm also clarifying. So when I listened recently, so when my sadhana is not perfect, and my chantings, but when my chanting is not perfect, I will be tended towards material sense gratification
Yeah,
more.
Yeah.
Is that
So yeah, so we have different stages of bhakti, even in pure bhakti. So we begin the process, and we go through a process of anarjana vritti until we get to nishta. Before the nishta, which is steadiness, it is unsteady. And when you're unsteady, you do not concentrate all the time. And sometimes you're distracted this way and that way.
no?
So this is all part of pure bhakti in one sense. We still have the principle of, you know, abhilasita sunya. We're not doing our bhakti with other desires, but we're in an unsteady position. But by practicing that pure bhakti in that unsteady position, eventually we get to nishta stage where we can perform all the things and we're not so much deviated. Maybe a little bit, not much. We go further, less deviation. And we get to bhava, very, very little deviation. Prema, zero.
But like when I'm not I'm not perfect still, is there like that? So the effect or the side effect, okay, side effect of it is you will be building up your false ego more.
Well, yeah, if you're inattentive and you let the anarthas overcome you, then definitely you can go backwards.
But is it like a side effect? Is it like a, I'm asking, is it like a, how should I say, side effect? Like a, sorry? Byproduct. No, the result. So if I am not doing my, I'm not chanting properly. Consequence. If I'm not doing my chanting properly, I am punished with ego build-up.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Or is my understanding correct?
May. If it's constant. If it's constantly inattentive, which can be an offense ultimately. if we consciously become inattentive,
Right.
then definitely our bhakti lackens, and then our material desires and material consciousness grow.
Right.
Until we may reach a stage where we have no taste for bhakti at all. So we go backwards, in other words.
Right. Now, and this Bhanu Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
So what about Prabhuji, Maharaj? What about Dhruva and Prahalad and Amrisha? Where they all come into which category?
Well, Dhruva had explicit material desire. He wanted to get a kingdom, so he went to the forest to worship Vishnu. So his motive was mixed bhakti. It was not pure. But he got the mercy of Narada Muni, who became his Diksha Guru, whatever. And then he was so determined that he got the mercy of Vishnu. Vishnu touched him and he got pure. Ambarish was pure. Who else you spoke of? Ganjadhar was impure. He was praying for get rid of the crocodile. Kill the crocodile for me. So he had impure bhakti.
But Gajendra, but finally he got like...
The Lord killed even with impure bhakti, the Lord was very merciful. So even the Lord is attracted to have impure bhakti, but of course it's always better to practice pure bhakti rather than impure bhakti.
Prahalada...
he was more or less pure, we can say pure. He himself says, oh, I got a little jnana there because his father was preaching jnana also, arta jnana, etc. So he's contaminated by my father, so I'm not so high devotee, whatever. But we take him as pure.
Thank you, Maharaj.
I have one quick question. Thank you for the wonderful class. So the development of bhava, which we say is, there's so many bhavas. I was reading Vishnu Purana, Vishnu Sastra now. It says Mahamana to the Lord. So our desires and our mana, which it developed, which is very small, but the desire from the Lord is bigger than that. So like what we develop as a bhava, eventually, is it from the desire of the Lord by himself, what we develop, or how we subtly stable ourselves, like feeling what bhava it should develop slowly with our practice?
How does bhava develop?
Yes.
Well, of course, it's all the mercy of the Lord ultimately, because bhakti, bhava, and prema are actually part of Krishna's Sarup Shakti.
Yeah.
They're part of himself, so we can't separate it from Krishna. And without his mercy, then we cannot get it. Usually we get it through the mercy of a devotee.
Yeah.
But we can't just say mercy, mercy, mercy and do nothing. So that's why we have a process called sadhana bhakti, in which we put forth some effort, some endeavor. So our endeavor is there, mercy of devotees and mercy of Krishna, also the other factors. So the two cannot be really separated. But generally, if we do the endeavor, then Krishna is merciful. So we seriously practice, Krishna is merciful, we advance more. And we advance more and do more practice, Krishna is more merciful. And so Krishna is merciful to everybody, even those practicing mixed bhakti. He's most merciful to a person in prema. So therefore in Nectar Devotion it says, Krishna Karshani, this is the last quality, special quality of bhakti, that The devotee in prema controls Krishna, which means he gives us unlimited mercy to that person.
So ultimately, Lord gave us that potency to develop that love. It's from
Oh yeah,
His
yeah,
side.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. And how we this ananyata, like shunya bhilashita, for this ananyata, it looks like very difficult. Like when we worshipping Lord Narasimha and other deities as well in the temple as well.
Mm-hmm.
So likely, if we are not focusing on that deity worship that time, I think it's little aparadha as well. So how ananyata goes to one deity at the same time when we have 3 or 4 deities in the same temple. So developing is ananyata is not little obstructive in worshipping all the deities.
You know what I mean? To having no other desire? What?
Like only worshipping Radha Krishna, not Ramchandra deities, or only worshipping Narasimha. Not,
Oh, how to be one
So, like,
pointed.
yeah,
Well, yeah,
one-pointed.
that's why I just said don't have too many deities. The less deities, the better. So ultimately, like in, Pancharatra, they give you one mantra for one deity, and that's the deity. You don't worship anybody else. So that's basically it. And in most of the temples, like in the Ramanuja temples, you only have one deity.
Yeah.
And then you have Lakshmi in a separate place, and that's it. You don't have millions of deities. And if it's Nrsimha, it's Nrsimha. If it's Vishnu, it's Krishna, it's Krishna. So they just have one deity in that temple.
So we should be very particular to have the deity at home, or is it like as
home,
advised?
temple, mind, whatever.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Concentrate.
Thank you.
The more we have deities, then the more our mind gets a little bit distracted, and then we start worshiping everybody, and so we have less concentration on Krishna.
Don't press. Hare Krishna Maharaj. So my question is, Bharat Maharaj is a devotee of the Lord, but he still like worship demigods, but in context with Lord Sri Krishna, he want to please Lord Sri Krishna, but at the same time he worship demigods as well.
Who's that?
Bharat Maharaj.
Bharat. Worshipping Krishna? He was worshipping Vishnu.
No, but he worshipped demigods as well. I was listening one class that he
Oh, I don't know.
that he worshipped
Anyway,
them.
it's not. We can worship devatas as long as we worship them as devotees, not independent of the Supreme Lord. You can worship, but you worship as like branches of the tree. We water the root, and they are like the branches. So we don't take them as independently bestowing benedictions.
No, he worshipped demigods in order to please Krishna. But I need to understand, sometimes the people they take in another way, they worship demigods as well, but at the same time they worship Krishna, and they get confused to whom they.
Yeah. So anyway, we have to have a proper understanding of the identity of the devatas, that they're not God, they are servants of God.
Mhm.
And if we have that attitude, then we worship them in that way, as devotees of God, not as supreme. And therefore, first we worship the Lord, and we offer the prasad of the Lord to the devatas. So that's the proper way of doing it. We
Yeah.
don't think of them as independent and offer them independent items.
Yeah, and also one more question. For example, devotee of the Lord Krishna, when sometimes they have a very difficult time, and people they said, "Oh, like you worship Krishna, but you can worship that demigod, and you get the result." And then they start, worship that demigods and get the result, but at the same time they worshiping Krishna as well.
Mm.
So, are they? Is that okay?
No.
If they do that?
It becomes a mixed type of bhakti.
Yeah.
Contaminates the bhakti, because you're not taking Krishna as the supreme independent. You're taking devatas giving separate results. So that becomes offensive.
Yeah, because somebody asked me, because they're chanting 16 rounds and something happened to their family, and then they say, can we, worship, Shani Dev because we have Shani. So
Yeah. So ultimately, worship of the Lord covers everything. So we don't have to do that.
Yeah, that's what I told them. Okay, thank you.
Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Maharaj.
One last question. Maharaj, if someone is new to bhakti and they still have a lot of material desires, but they're not sinful desires, do we actually need to, I guess, suppress those desires, or do we fulfill them and at the same time try to grow in our bhakti?
Well, if the desires are related, they're not sinful. So, which means ultimately, if they're not sinful, then they're not excessively into unnecessary sense gratification. That would mean they're more related to maintaining and continuing your material body, so to speak. So then they're permissible.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Maharaj, when you spoke about the Vegas, so the Vega of the mind, Manasa Vega, is very, very strong, Maharaj. And we try to do our daily sadhana to get over it, Maharaj, but we still pulled in different ways. So what should we do on a daily practical basis, Maharaj?
Yeah. Well, of course, Bhagavad-gita and Christian Bhagavad-gita says that. It's like, the senses are pulling you, like it's the boat in the stormy water, and the wind is pushing it this way and that way. Difficult to control the mind, difficult to control the senses. And Arjuna says, yes, too difficult, I cannot be a yogi. But then Krishna says, well, in any case, you have to control the mind. So you do so by practice. So at least we maybe have uncontrolled mind, but we have to keep practicing on a daily basis to do that, to control. And of course, our main practice is engaging our senses and serving Krishna somehow or other. So we try to keep engaged in Krishna's service. That's how we control the mind. But it's a daily practice we have to do.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Last one, Maharaj. So, just with the examples like Mrigari and the Jagai and Madhai, because obviously they're not even practicing, they literally got the causeless mercy of the Lord. So those examples are there to show that it's just the compassionate nature of the Lord and His devotees that
Yeah.
we can expect that mercy as well.
Well, of course, the name itself is most merciful, as we see in the case of Ajamil. It wasn't bhakti at all, and he just named his son Narayana, and he got free of all of his sinful activities, etc. No reaction at all in the second. So the name is all-powerful. If we avoid offenses, then it becomes powerful. If there are offenses, it becomes less powerful. Still, it has action. So along with that chanting, in order to avoid the offenses, then we take association of devotees, and we get the guidance of scripture, etc. And through that, we learn to practice bhakti properly. So that's the normal mode, and through that we can gradually advance in spite of our offenses or whatever. Gradually the effect of offenses vanishes, and processes of bhakti will speed up as the offenses get destroyed.
There's no harm in begging for the causeless mercy every day.
Well, we can always pray for the mercy, yeah. But we can't separate that from our own endeavor also.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Pray for mercy and don't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, because we can only do so much based on the level of our bhakti or the level of our consciousness. So we sometimes feel very frustrated already that I want to be there, but because of the modes, I'm being stuck where I am. And so that's in the helpless condition. We pray to the Lord for help.
Well, that's also a type of bhakti, to pray in a helpless condition. So that's one of the angas of bhakti also. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj ki jai.
So tomorrow and day after also we continue Nectar and Krishna.